Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Woodbois Limited Annual General Meeting. Throughout this recorded meeting, attendees online will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted anytime via the Q&A tab that's just situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Please just simply type in your questions and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question submitted today. However, all questions will be reviewed with responses published on the Investor Meet Company platform where it is appropriate to do so. I'll now like to hand you over to the chairman of the meeting, John Nelson. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is now 11 a.m. and a quorum is present either in person or online, and therefore I'd like to propose opening the 2022 Annual General Meeting of Woodbois Limited. I'm John Nelson. I am the chairman of the meeting. Shareholders have been given the opportunity to follow the proceedings online through the Investor Meet Company platform. Following the formal proceedings of the meeting, I will hand over to Paul Dolan, Chief Executive Officer, to provide a short presentation to answer questions submitted either pre-event or during the proceedings via this platform. I propose taking the notice of this AGM and matters convening the meeting as read. The proxy results be read out after each resolution is proposed and seconded. This complies with the UK Corporate Governance Code. Sadly, the platform does not enable us to differentiate between shareholders and non-holders, so the proposer and seconder of each resolution will be company officers. I would note that the actual votes cast by proxy for all resolutions were in favour, with not less than 99% voting in favour of each resolution. The first resolution is to receive and adopt the Directors' Report, the audited statement of accounts and auditor's report for the year ended 31st December 2021. I now formally propose this resolution, and I would ask Nick Merrion to second the resolution.
I second the resolution.
Thank you. I declare the resolution carried as an ordinary resolution. I will now give the proxy count on this resolution. In favour, 571,205,612 votes, representing 98.543%. Against, 99,251 votes, representing 0.017%. We've received no directions and abstentions, 8,343,333 votes, representing 1.439%. The second resolution is to elect David Rothschild as the director of the company. I now formally propose this resolution and would ask Nick Merrion to second the resolution.
I second the resolution.
Thank you. I declare the resolution carried as an ordinary resolution. I will now give the proxy count for this resolution. In favour, 579,519,553 votes, representing 99.978%. Against, 108,643 votes, representing 0.019%. There have been no directions and abstentions, 20,000 votes, representing 0.003%. The third resolution is to re-elect Carnell Geddes as the director of the company. I now formally propose the resolution as an ordinary resolution and would ask Nick Merrion to second the resolution.
I second the resolution.
Thank you. I declare the resolution carried as an ordinary resolution. I will now give the proxy count on this resolution. In favour, 579,353,216 votes, representing 99.949%. Against, 274,980 votes, representing 0.047%. There have been no directions and abstentions, 20,000 votes, representing 0.003%. The fourth resolution is to re-elect Graham Thompson as a director of the company. I now formally propose the resolution as an ordinary resolution and would ask Nick Merrion to second the resolution.
I second the resolution.
Thank you. I declare the resolution carried as an ordinary resolution. I will now give the proxy count on this resolution. In favour, 571,019,883 votes, representing 98.511%. Against, 284,980, representing 0.049%. There have been no directions and abstentions, 8,343,333 votes, representing 1.439%. The fifth resolution is to reappoint PKF Littlejohn LLP as auditors of the company. I now formally propose the resolution as an ordinary resolution and would ask Nick Marion to second the resolution.
I second the resolution.
Thank you. I declare the resolution carried as an ordinary resolution. I will now give the proxy count on this resolution. In favour, 571,203,435 votes, representing 98.543%. Against, 101,428 votes, representing 0.017%. There have been no directions and abstentions, 8,343,333 votes, representing 1.439%. The sixth resolution is to authorise the directors to determine the auditor's remuneration. I now formally propose the resolution as an ordinary resolution and would ask Nick Marion to second the resolution.
I second the resolution.
Thank you. I will now give you the proxy count on this resolution. In favour, 579,526,992, representing 99.979%. Against, 111,204 votes, representing 0.019%. There have been no directions and abstentions, 10,000 votes, representing 0.002%. The seventh resolution is the allotment of shares by the directors for case or otherwise to the extent set out in the notice of the meeting. I now formally propose that the resolution is an ordinary resolution. I would ask Nick Marion to second the resolution.
I second the resolution.
Thank you. I declare the resolution carried as an ordinary resolution. I will now give the proxy count on this resolution. In favour, 579,479,330 votes, representing 99.971%. Against, 146,643 votes, representing 0.025%. There have been no directions. Abstentions, 22,223 votes, representing 0.004%. The eighth resolution is a special resolution and is to approve the disapplication of preemption rights, as to say, to allow shares to be allotted for cash otherwise than to existing shareholders in proportion to their existing holdings, to the extent set out in the notice of the meeting. I now formally propose the resolution as a special resolution and would ask Nick Marion to second the resolution.
I second the resolution.
Thank you. I declare the resolution carried as a special resolution. I will now give the proxy count for this resolution. In favour, 579,288,948 votes, representing 99.938%. Against, 331,862 votes, representing 0.057%. There have been no directions. Abstentions, 27,386 votes, representing 0.005%. That concludes the formal business of the annual general meeting of Woodbois Limited. I now hand over to Paul Dolan, Chief Executive Officer, who will make a short presentation and answer questions.
Morning, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us. Thank you, John, for chairing. The presentation that I'm going to walk you through now gives a snapshot of the business as it stands today, and also looks forward to the direction that we intend to take it in. A couple of things to mention at the beginning. Over the last 12 months, we've separated the roles of Chair and CEO, and we've made the role of Chair non-executive in line with best corporate governance practice. Graham Thompson, who's with us this morning, has offered a huge amount to the business since joining us 3 years ago. He's a very significant culture carrier within the company for us. Really happy to work with Graham, that he's taken on the role of non-exec chair. We also added a very strong non-executive director last November. He's in the room. David, if you want to put your hand up, everyone can see you. So David Rothschild has deep on-the-ground experience of executing agroforestry projects in West Africa, something obviously that we want to do ourselves, and his guidance is proving really valuable to us. I also must mention Olivier Normand, who you see bottom right of this slide, who made a really big move personally from Canada to Mouila in Gabon 18 months ago. Olivier has had a huge impact on our productivity and our processes, as you'll see as we go through the slide. He's also project managing our very important drive towards full FSC certification. And then rounding off the board, Carnell, who's also with us, our CFO, Mike Floyd, Hadi Hussain. All of these people bring really strong leadership qualities to their respective areas. We've got real depth of talent within this company. So to give you an idea of the trajectory of the business, I'll quickly recap what's been achieved so far this year. You may have picked some of this up in the Q1 announcement that we put out. But in the first quarter, we grew revenues by 22%. Profit margins increased by a further 3% from last year. And we maintained strict control over cash management and working capital. In Gabon, production increased by 24% at our sawmill and 13% at our veneer factory. And to speed up the delivery of product to our customers, something again that we're very, very focused on, from start to finish, we've re-engineered our logistics process. And I think it's worth noting that this growth has been achieved on top of gains that we made in all of these areas during 2021. So we're now really starting to see a return on the investment that's gone into the business since 2018. So Woodbois has almost 500,000 hectares of African forestry concessions and carries 258 million of net assets on its balance sheet. In Gabon, you can see we have a sawmill and a veneer factory into which we've invested more than $10 million since 2018. In Copenhagen and London, we trade timber that we buy from third-party suppliers and we sell our own production. In Mozambique, we run a very light operation, really, in order to maintain the concessions there. We haven't had the funding to build that part of the business out, or we've chosen to put the funds that we have had available into Gabon, where we've had a lot of success. And we've grown revenues from less than $1 million when I arrived as CEO back in 2016 to what I expect to be well in excess of 20 million this year, obviously 17.5 million last year. But we feel we're still really only scratching the surface of what can be achieved. So as a company, we're aiming for a leadership position in the African timber market. And current turnover is only around 0.5% of the declared market. So, we see very significant room for growth from here. Also important to note that directors own around 5% of the shares in the company. So the management team is very strongly aligned with shareholders. A snapshot here of Gabon, where, as I say, we focused our capex for the last few years. Gabon has a large landmass, a really small population of just 2 million people, forward-thinking and environmentally conscious political leadership, with very strong and enforced laws for forestry protection. Unfortunately for us, perfect conditions for growing trees. So much so that the OECD has ranked Gabon the #1 country in the world for cost efficiency in which to grow trees. This slide shows the circular nature of Woodbois' business model. So in the top left, you see that we sustainably manage very large forestry concessions, which provide the raw material for us to then produce low carbon building materials, which you see in the top right. So both of these activities provide jobs which support communities in remote rural areas, and that allows us to balance the environmental need to conserve forests with the economic needs of the people who live nearby, so that they don't have to chop down trees for firewood, to cook and to live, which, by the way, is by far the biggest contributor to deforestation in Africa. In addition to that, in the bottom left, you'll see that we intend to develop large-scale carbon capturing reforestation projects. Now, that creates more jobs again, and obviously has a beneficial effect on both climate and biodiversity. So it's a virtuous circle, and frankly, with more demand for all of our outputs than we can satisfy. So slide 9. We use this slide to explain how and why these concessions are sustainable, because it's a question that we often get asked. On the top left of this slide, you'll see a year before we enter the forest, where we'll ultimately extract a very small number of commercially selected trees, we put a GPS marker on every tree that's been selected. And within each hectare, and think of, if you look at the bottom right, think of a hectare as a rugby pitch or a football pitch. There are between 500 and 1,000 trees. Now, we can only take out around 5 trees from that hectare. And once we've taken out those 5 trees, we can't enter that hectareage again for at least 20 years. So the logging is very low impact. Typically 7 smaller trees will come up through the canopy once we've taken out the large tree. And the method that we use is called continuous cover forestry. The next slide is about our journey towards certification. Now, you might be familiar with the Forestry Stewardship Council, or the FSC. If you look at the back of a birthday card or a book, you'll probably see the FSC stamp. And the FSC is the gold standard of certification for forestry management. Now, again, Gabon being forward thinking, they've put into law that all concession holders in the country are going to be required to be FSC certified by 2023. And I'm pleased to say that we're on track to have achieved full certification for not just for our forest, but also for our production facilities by that date. Now, over and above that, we're really happy to have teamed up with World Forest ID, who are an incredible international organisation dedicated to the protection of forests through the application of science-based origin tracing and species identification that is really quite revolutionary. So slide 11, as well as certifying our operations in the forest, the FSC, as I say, will need to certify the compliance of our sawmill, where investment has increased capacity by almost 3 times since 2018, and which now employs more than 200 people. And of course, our veneer factory, where you see some pictures of here, which we're continuing to invest in, and where we expect the first of 2 new purchase lines that we bought last year to become operational within the next 60 days. Again, something that we're really excited about in terms of increasing our production. This new line will more than double the existing capacity of the veneer factory, and veneer is currently our highest margin product. The veneers typically go into plywood, which you'll all be familiar with. A natural step for us in the future would be to enter the plywood market and obviously invest in a plywood plant. The next slide is on trading. Now, margins within our trading division had a really decent jump last year, up to 11%. And while these margins, obviously, they're lower than for our own production because we don't own the whole supply chain there. The potential for exponential growth is actually much higher because, of course, we can source from multiple African suppliers. Last year, as you see, we sourced from 43 different suppliers, and we're building that supplier base. I spent my first career trading derivatives, so building technology to provide insight for our trading team into what's really a pretty opaque and I think a really overlooked market has been a priority for me personally. We haven't had the type of budget that traders take for granted at banks or hedge funds. So it's taken time to build this tech. But I think we now have some pretty unique and really quite valuable IP, and I think this technology will help our traders generate profitable growth as we grow, and particularly as we reduce our cost of capital. Now, the next couple of slides probably cover off a lot of the questions that we get, I guess, on an almost daily kind of incoming basis. Since we started talking about doing a large-scale reforestation project for carbon sequestration, and hopefully they'll explain why we decided to enter the nature-based solutions or reforestation for carbon capture space, and hopefully also debunk any misconceptions or misinformation that might be out there. Now, we've seen in an earlier slide that Gabon is one of the best places on the planet to grow trees. We also know that Woodbois has 20 years of experience managing large-scale areas of forest, and therefore has a strong profile, not just with the government in Gabon, but with the communities from which we draw our labour force. Now, on top of that, within the company, we have deep capital markets, structuring and risk management experience. So in terms of integrated skill sets and experience, I think we're probably unique in Africa. And entering the carbon market through the development of large-scale reforestation projects, particularly given what's happened to the price of carbon over the last 3 years, is a really natural extension of our activities. Now, some of the key benefits of entering this space are shown in the pictograms that you see on the right-hand side of this slide. And if we go clockwise from the top left, we're going to grow indigenous tree species. So we're going to grow the right tree for the right place. We're not bringing in foreign monocultures into these areas. We're going to grow trees that actually belong there. And then top right, clearly there are biodiversity as well as carbon sequestering benefits. As you come down, clearly we're going to create employment in areas where jobs are actually very scarce, and that ensures the support of the local communities, who will be our labour force. And the projects make money. Now, how much money the projects make ultimately depends, very much on the future price of carbon. But clearly, as a company, we have a pretty bullish view on that. And importantly, this is long term, as I'll explain in the next slide. This is a really long term project. So I've explained why Gabon is the best place in the world to execute such projects. And I think as investors, you'll all take your own view on the forward price of carbon. But it's kind of difficult not to be bullish if you follow the words climate change on any of your news feeds. So if you just let me explain the likely timeline of the projects. Number one, at year zero, we need the state to agree to a long-term lease on an appropriate low carbon stock tract of land. When I say long-term lease, we're asking for 50 years to start with, but we want that renewable so that when the forest has grown, it will become like a normal forestry concession. But to be clear, during that first 50 years, we don't intend to be cutting trees, for processing. The only reason we'd be taking out trees is to assist the growth of the forest. So the second part is to agree terms with an equity partner to fund the project. And to give you an idea of costs, we've asked for a 35,000 hectare project, and that would cost around $70 million to implement over a 10 to 15 year period. So hence the need to bring in an equity partner, unless of course we decide to fund it ourselves. We then kick off a 3 to 4 year trial phase. And then the results from that trial phase guide the implementation phase. which takes another 10 years of planting. And in total, the forest takes around 45 years to start reaching maturity. And then, as I say, after 45 to 50 years, the new forest becomes a sustainable forestry management concession. And in this case, we're talking about having a high concentration of okume, which is the most populous species in Gabon. So the final slide, and just to quickly wrap up before questions, we now have a profitable core business with a geographically diverse customer base, as you see, top left. We provide an essential construction material for the decarbonisation of global economies, which seems bound to happen over the next 10, 20 years. And while steel and concrete are big emitters of carbon, timber clearly absorbs and retains carbon. We have a very strong ESG focus. It's part of the DNA of this company. The core business doesn't now need huge capex, as you see in the bottom left. We've spent money on capex, and we don't need that much more to continue the growth trajectory. And in the middle at the bottom, you'll see very clearly the trend lines for our EBITDA, for our total gross profit, and for gross profit margins are all strongly positive. And in the bottom right, clearly we're aiming to become a real player in a market that McKinsey believes will be worth $50 billion annually by 2030. So we're in good shape. We're in a really great space. Hopefully the presentation has answered some of the questions that we've been receiving already. But we're happy to take any questions that we still have time for.
Paul, that's great, and thank you very much indeed for your presentation this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions just by using the Q&A tab that's situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. But just while the company takes a few moments to review those questions submitted already, I would like to remind you that a recording of this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed via your investor dashboard. Paul, as you can see, we have received a number of questions that have come in throughout today's presentation, and I will shortly invite you to open up that Q&A tab to respond to those where it's appropriate to do so. But we did receive a number of pre-submitted questions ahead of today's event from investors, and if I may, I wanted to start off the Q&A session with these. The first one that we have here reads as follows: an article was produced regarding your company getting the license to sell carbon credits. Is this correct?
Okay. The voluntary carbon market has globally recognized standards agencies such as Verra and Gold Standard, kind of in the same way that the bond market has ratings agencies like S&P and Moody's. So when carbon credits are created, for example, by growing trees that sequester carbon, which is obviously what Woodbois is planning to do at scale, the standards agencies come along, they verify and register those credits, and then those credits can be sold. So that's the process. There isn't a license as such.
Thank you very much for that. The second question that we have here that was pre-submitted reads as follows: do you have any plans to advance or promote the stock, and what catalysts can we see affecting the stock going forward?
Okay, sounds like two questions. Firstly, our broker Canaccord is responsible for getting management, ourselves, in front of institutional investors, and that's obviously one way of promoting the company. But I think in terms of promoting the company, obviously there are a lot more people on this call this year than there were last year and in previous years. So I think one of the things that we realised while we were at COP26 was that we got really fantastic feedback to what we were posting on Twitter and LinkedIn. So as a result of that, we're now providing much more frequent updates and sharing relevant news flow via those channels. So in terms of promotion, that's something that we're active in doing. The second part of the question was about catalysts. So I think on one hand, we have the potential for immediate growth and higher levels of profitability. So that would be one catalyst with regards to the core business. But also clearly we have the potential for upside from closing our first large-scale carbon afforestation project.
Thank you very much for that. I know you have just touched on the upside, but another question that we have here that was pre-submitted reads as follows: which part of the business do you think is being ignored that has more upside potential than the market is currently giving it?
Well, I don't think the market has historically paid much attention to the forestry sector as a whole. So I don't think that that being ignored is at all specific to Woodbois. But I do think there's real potential for that to change as more investors, and I think particularly the next generation of investors, start to insist that the people who are managing their pensions and their money only invest in things that don't harm the planet, like trees.
Thank you very much for that. And the final pre-submitted question we have is from Adam. It reads as follows: over the next 6 years, what kind of profits are you looking at achieving from year to year? Will there be an increase, or are you looking at the same profit throughout the next 6 years? Also, when these carbon credits kick in, say, 2028-ish, what kind of profit do you expect to make on top of what you're already making?
Okay, well, look, firstly, we're certainly not looking to stand still. Our broker, Canaccord, covers our stock. They expect revenues to increase by around 50% this year, and for EBITDA to go from $1 million to $3 million. And on top of that, for revenue and profitability to continue to grow in future years as we bring more capacity online. And hopefully, as I explained, with regards to what we make on top from carbon, I hope that the slides made it clear that this is really about creating a long-term annuity revenue stream over 45 years as the forest develops and as the trees grow, as they do every day.
Thank you very much for that, Paul. And that actually concludes the pre-submitted questions. And as you can see, we've also had a number of questions that were submitted today by investors. And thank you to all the investors for submitting their questions. If I could just hand back to you to run through that Q&A tab and where it's appropriate to do so, if you could please just read out the questions and give your response, and then I'll pick up from you at the end, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay. So from Chris H, could you please explain why there is a deferred tax item on your balance sheet? I'm going to let Carnell, our CFO, come in on this one.
Thanks, Paul. So deferred tax is a fairly technical area of accounting, but I'm trying to keep the explanation simple and short. If you look at our accounts in note 7, that relates specifically to deferred tax, and you can see there that it really relates to 2 assets that we carry on our balance sheet. The first one, or class of assets, would be our biological assets, and the other class of assets is our property, plant, and equipment. And to be specific, it relates to our land and buildings, the land and buildings in Gabon that we own. Now, we apply IFRS, which is International Financial Reporting Standards, when we prepare our accounts, and those standards, combined with our accounting policies, require that we carry these 2 classes of assets at their fair value. Now, this means that when the value goes up, we write it up in our books. If the value goes down, then we must equally write it down in our books. Now, the action of writing up or writing down the value of these assets affects our statement of profit and loss and other comprehensive income. And this is where we would report that profit or loss. Now, when we recognize that profit or loss, IFRS require that we also raise tax, and we call it deferred tax, on that profit or loss. And on the balance sheet, what you see there is the cumulative adjustment that we carry on all of those adjustments. It, in a nutshell, represents the tax that could be charged in the future as we recover the carrying value of those assets. Now, I want to be very clear that current tax is very different to deferred tax. So this deferred tax that we carry on the balance sheet, and it is a liability, is not a tax that has been assessed on us, and it's not a tax that we owe any tax authority. I can maybe just talk a little bit about how it's calculated as well. So, as a group, we have an average current tax rate of 19%, but that just shows the tax rates applicable in all of the geographical areas where we operate. But deferred tax is different. And for that, you look at where the asset on which the fair value adjustment is based, where that asset is located geographically. And then you apply the tax rate that you have to use in that jurisdiction. So for us, the biological assets are located in Mozambique and in Gabon, and the land and buildings are located in Gabon. So when we write up the assets in Gabon, we would then also accrue deferred tax, and a deferred tax liability in this case at 30%, and for Mozambique 32%, which are the tax rates that are enacted in those jurisdictions.
Thanks, Carnell. Comprehensive as ever. So then the next question was from Alex C. Your margins have seen a nice uplift in 2021. Do you consider that those margins are sustainable? I think, are you happy to take that, Carnell?
Yeah, thanks. So those margins were great, but I don't want to fool anyone that it didn't take a lot of hard work. Obviously, you know, there's been a lot of publications out there that have reported the general increase in market prices in our industry, and that definitely has happened. But I think equally, there's been a lot of press around logistics costs and other costs that have increased. So that has been a real reality for us too. So that's why I say it did take a lot of hard work to get those margins to that point. Took a lot of talking to our customers, a lot of talking to our suppliers, you know, being innovative on logistics, using the technology that Paul had referred to before. And on top of that, so not only working on sort of the trade side, but also, you know, Paul has mentioned and introduced Olivier to you before, and we've really made huge strides in making our production more efficient. And more efficient production normally means, you know, saving in costs and quicker turnaround and lockup of capital. And so that has also played a very large role in the increase in the margins. Now, I think our year-end margins were 20%, the average margin for the company. And as Paul has said, for Q1, that had gone up to 23%. And also, maybe I could also just mention the Canaccord research that is out there. And they have us maintaining that 20% and slightly increasing it actually over the next 3 years at least. And it's a very big part of my job to ensure that we achieve that. And with all the work that we've already put in and the technology that we have, I do consider that we can maintain it.
Thanks, Carnell. Next question is what is the risk of forest fires in Gabon? Of course, there's a risk of forest fires anywhere, but in a rainforest, probably much less so. It will be a risk for us when we're doing the afforestation project, and it's something that we will have to manage with fire breaks and those types of protocols. But in terms of the risk compared to other places in the world, I would say it's significantly lower because there are 3 meters of rainfall per year in Gabon, and very, very long wet seasons. The next question is, some stock was lost, inverted commas, a year or so ago. This is from Harry W. Was that resolved? Have there been any repeat incidents? What was it resolved? We didn't recover what was stolen from us. Let's be clear. There are people that are in prison as a result of that. There is an ongoing investigation, and it hasn't actually come to trial yet. And I'm very happy to say there have been absolutely no repeat incidents. And obviously, it was a painful lesson, but certainly one that we learned from. Jennifer E asks, can carbon credits be claimed now or in the future for the million acres now managed in Gabon and Mozambique? Yes, a really interesting question, because something that we've seen, like a trend in the States, for example, is something called carbon avoidance projects. So where people have forests and they agree not to do any cutting whatsoever within that forest, and the forest is still growing. So in other words, it's not at full maturity. You can claim for avoiding taking out any trees. So we any credits for our existing concessions, really, they belong to governments. They don't belong to us. And I'm glad you've asked the question, because I want to really draw a distinction between our existing concessions and the new area that has no trees on it, that has almost zero carbon stock on it at the moment, that we will be growing trees on and being able to claim carbon credits for. The next question is Michael G. is Woodbois planning in the future to expand their sawmill and veneer factory facilities into other regions of Africa beyond Gabon and Mozambique? So, Michael, to answer your question, probably we receive, I don't know, I would say several proposals per month of things that may or may not be interesting to us, and we do filter them. Please remember we do have pretty deep capital markets experience within the company, and I think it's a function of working in the area that we work in. We will continue to see really interesting opportunities, and we. Of course, we expect a lot of organic growth from this point, but we're also, very, very open where we see opportunities to move into other countries as well. Yes. I think we timed it for 11:40, so that's probably as much as we have time for.
Well, Paul, that's great. And Carnell as well. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to address all those questions that came through from investors today. And of course, if there are any further questions submitted today, we'll make these available to you immediately after the presentation has ended for your review. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll publish those responses where it's appropriate to do so on the Investor Meet Company platform. John, perhaps before redirecting the attendees online to provide you with their feedback, which I know is particularly important to the company, if I could please just ask you for a few closing comments to wrap up with, that'd be great.
Thank you. Well, it just remains for me to thank everyone for attending and for the board here. And I'm sure you'll join me in looking forward to the coming year for the company. So any other questions you need, please submit them online through the. I hereby declare the meeting closed.
Thank you very much indeed to the board for updating attendees online today. Could I please ask attendees online not to close this session, as you'll now be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the board can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, and I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the board of Woodbois Limited PLC, we'd like to thank you for attending today's annual general meeting, and good afternoon to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.